Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Life Apprentice. In this episode, I got to sit down with Mike Baxter. Mike Baxter ran Parkview Medical Center here in Pueblo, Colorado for 17 years as a CEO. And during that time, the company grew over 1,000 employees. Now in this episode, I got to talk to him about how the hospital ran, how he got into that CEO position, and also some of the tools that he used to build influence with his employees and the community. I was honored to be able to sit down with such a great leader and get to hear his story, and I'm excited to be able to share it with you guys. Now, I do want to point out that this episode was recorded before the coronavirus pandemic, so we are a little closer than 6 feet, but I just want to also say for those of you that are affected by this, I wish you the best of luck. If there's anything I can do to help, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help coach you guys in this time of need, and now's the time to really be cutting budgets and doing anything you can to stay afloat for the next 90 to 120 days. So I wish you guys the best of luck, and I hope you enjoy this episode. So, Mike, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so as you said, I'm Mike Baxter. I was a healthcare administrator, was the CEO of Parkview for 11 years. Been at Parkview over 20 years in my career. But small town guy, grew up in Canyon City, Catholic education, went to grade school there, and then graduated from Holy Cross Abbey over in Canyon. Big family, very close to all my brothers and sisters. I have 4 sisters and 3 brothers, and I talk to them at least 3 or 4 times a month. So keep tabs on all of them. But just kind of a small town fun guy that had some different opportunities presented and was very fortunate. So.
And where did you go to college?
My first 2 years, I went up to Colorado State in Fort Collins.
Okay.
Then I had a few setbacks in my life. Some things happened. My father passed away, and then I came back home and I regrouped and retooled. And then I ended up finishing my bachelor's in accounting out at CSU Pueblo. Worked for a few years, and then I went back and got my master's at Pueblo as well. So very proud grad of CSU Pueblo.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So where did your interest in accounting come from?
Well, it's kind of a different story because when I was up at CSU one day, I was studying general business, and then I looked, and it's funny because I went to the ad drop where you used to go in the gym and try to pick up classes, and it was kind of crazy, but all the lines were really long, and then I looked at the accounting lines, and they were pretty short. So I needed to get some accounting credits, and I hopped in those lines and started meeting people, and next thing you knew, I kind of enjoyed it. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you just go straight into your master's?
No.
You said you took some time off, you worked.
Yeah, I worked, and then I went back, finished up my bachelor's out here in accounting.
Okay.
And then I went back to work, and I was working. I finished up in the grocery, and then in about 1990, I started working in healthcare finance.
Okay, so that's when you started using the accounting degree.
Yep.
And this was before you went back to school.
Correct.
Okay. So then you went back to school, got a master's in business.
Business administration, emphasis in finance, and so I did that, and then that opened up some opportunities that I wanted to see, and one of those was working with a software and consulting firm that helped hospitals, and so they were based out of the Bay Area, and it was a company called Hospital Cost Consultants, and it was about cost accounting software, and then how to manage contracts with managed care plans like Blue Cross and how to optimize relationships and a little bit of turnaround work when you saw hospitals that were really struggling. And so I got to do that, and I did that for 4 years, and it was very good. I was all over the country. I didn't ever time it well, and what I mean by that is I was always going to Florida in the summer and Wisconsin in the winter. So my work was always kind of backwards from where I wanted to be. But it was a great company. They were very good to me. And then had one boy, and he was 14 months old, and then I had twins that were born. And my wife said, "You're done traveling." And,
so how often were you traveling for that job, do you think?
I was going probably 3 weeks a month. I'd leave on Monday and come back on Thursday. So and I miss my son. So it wasn't like it was a hard decision.
Gotcha. And so back up a little bit. So the business administration degree. Why did you choose to go back and get that? I
saw several opportunities with that. One is if you want to be a leader in healthcare, the base of what you have to have, either that or a master's in healthcare administration or whatever. But I was too focused on the business side. I wanted to see the business world. So I wanted to advance my career, and I really was very passionate about hospitals and hospital finance. It just kind of clicked with me. So yeah.
And that passion came from being on that other side and seeing that,
Yeah.
and that grew as you went in with it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you tell everyone what you did for the last 17 years, 18 years?
So the last 18 years, in 2004, in 2003, I came back to Parkview in 1999 as a VP. I was a VP of managed care, and I ran the physician networks, and that was just an incredible opportunity, getting to meet all the docs and getting to know them. And then in 2005, I talked to the CEO, and our chief operating officer was moving on, and I said, I want that job. And he said, well, we'll have to interview people. And I said, I understand. But I was hired as the COO in 2005, April. And then 4 years later, I moved into the CEO position in 2009.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you were in the CEO position for
almost 11 years.
Yeah,
just 1
years.
month short of 11 years.
But you were in Parkview's leadership team for
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
20 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So now everyone knows kind of where you were.
Uh-huh.
Let's back up. You said you started with Parkview. Before that, what did that look like?
So I actually had 2 tours with Parkview. I worked for Parkview in the early 90s, and I went in and helped set up some cost accounting systems and did some strategic planning, and I really liked that too. And I got to work with some very good people there that really allowed me to grow. And then when I finished my master's, this company came calling and said, hey, we want you to go on the road and work with us. And that's what pulled me out of Parkview. And then when I came back to Parkview in 99, it was just a great fit because I knew the people, I knew the culture, and really just was very honored to be brought back there.
Gotcha.
So,
and when you came back, you were what position?
I was a vice president of managed care and physician networks. Yeah.
Gotcha. So what was the job duty of that mostly?
So what had happened was their physician network kind of fell apart. They had some challenges with some risk-based contracts, and they needed somebody to come back in and kind of regroup the team and pull the pieces back together. And it was not in great shape. And it was one of those things where you're given an opportunity and things are pretty rough. So anything you do is probably going to get better. And so I was able to work with a great group of people, and we formed something called Pueblo Healthcare, and it exists today. And it's the premier physician network in Southern Colorado.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
And that's kind of the nice thing when you come into something that's already at the bottom, nowhere to go but up,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. So you did that for, you said, 4 years? 5 years?
Oh, I did that for, 99, for about 6 years.
6 years?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you moved into the
COO.
And so how'd that journey start? That was, you said you went and talked with the CEO.
Yeah.
And said, I want this job.
Well, I did. And he's just a great guy. But a couple years before that, I told him, I said, he asked me, he was a great mentor. His name was C.W. Smith. And he said, you lean toward the finance side today? And I said, really, I'd like to look at operations. And so what he did for me, which was great, was he assigned me some departments to manage. And so he started peeling off things for me to do. And one of my favorite departments there was the environmental services team. And those people were just awesome. And so I got to know them, work with them, and I did some work with them. I did some work in the lab. So I got to step in as a VP and provide oversight for these departments, and got to build some relationships.
So before you were CEO, the CEO was giving you kind of oversight, kind of the COO job before having exactly the title.
Correct.
You were doing the work and then ended up getting the job.
He really helped me create a path toward becoming a COO and migrating over, and I will forever be grateful for that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So what lessons do you learn just starting off in that position?
I think you have to continuously challenge yourself, and you have to look at things and take them for what they are and their opportunities, and some of them are tougher than others, but the truth is, there's healthcare is just, it's an amazing place to work. It is evolving so fast, and trying to keep up and trying to make things work. It was just a lot of fun, but
Yeah.
you got to take on the challenges.
Yeah,
So
I'm sure it's a very challenging field. I mean,
it has its moments.
there's a lot of
but
innovation in there. There's
yeah,
things changing, laws changing, people changing,
yep,
diseases changing. I mean,
yeah,
it's a constantly changing field.
yeah.
I'm sure makes it very interesting to work in.
It really does. It's like you just defined, very dynamic and but very rewarding too. To be able to walk through the hospital and talk to people and see people, and not every story's a good one coming out of there, but you probably, when you have a down day, I'd head up to the OB area where you had a lot of great stories. 'Cause
Yeah.
people were leaving with new babies, so
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun.
Awesome. So going into that in your first couple of years, what's something you struggled with evolving into that role?
When you're a younger guy and we had a lot of leaders, a lot of longevity at Parkview, and that's still true today, but we had a lot of leaders that were set in their ways, been there a long time, seen this, done this, and we tried that didn't work. And so there was some frustration and pushback, and that darn young, that guy. So worked through a little bit of that, saying we got to try this. And some of the things we tried didn't work, and some of them worked really well. But I always believed if you got to try. If you're not going to work on things and try to get better, then you should be doing something else. So not be in healthcare.
Is there anything you did specifically to maybe work with those people that were stuck in their ways and move forward with that? I mean, because that can be a roadblock sometimes. How did you push through that?
I think persistence and not going away
Yeah.
and being there and saying, hey, we're going to do this.
Sticking around.
Yeah. And then I think, just being tenacious about certain things you think are going to work. And, rallying people behind you to say we can do this.
You're learning the role. You're learning leadership. You were put in a good position by the current CEO to learn how to lead and be a COO and move into that field. What happened next once you mastered that VP role? How did that transition happen?
So it really happened over a period of time, and the other neat guy I need to mention is the chief financial officer there. His name was Bill Patterson, and Bill's a dear friend and still is a dear friend. And Bill and I we had a lot of common interests, finance backgrounds, but we used to wander we get up. I meet him early in the morning, and we walk Mineral Palace Park, and we just talk about life and business and where we were headed. And one day he said, really, you ought to look at trying to run this place. And it was funny because originally I was thinking about going to Salida or one of those smaller hospitals to say I could get my hands around something like this. And I said, you really think I could do this? He said, yeah, I know you could do this. It's just a matter of whether you want to make the commitment and make it all work. And so he inspired me as well. And that was the combination of the two. It just kind of set me up on a path to build a resume, be successful. I mean, if I weren't successful in a lot of things I did along the way, they would have said, hey, thanks, it's good having you here. But, I was fortunate and had some good things happen along the way. And when the role came open in April, board talked to me and I was thinking, okay, if they go out to interview, does that point to the confidence they have in me? And they opted not to and said, we think you're the guy. And one of the things Parkview has is just a fantastic board, community people. And what they always tell you is we're Puebloans first, and then we're Parkview board members second. So we have to watch out for this town. So it fell into place. And April 1 of 2009, I won't forget this. I was in my office. It was raining, cold that night, and it was colder than most Aprils are. I'm looking out the window saying, what did this board do? And am I ready for this? And I just started moving, and it was time to do my job. So, yeah. But I did have a few moments early on in my career where I thought, boy, you gotta get this figured out. So, yeah.
When you were awarded the CEO position, do you feel like you were ready?
I felt like I was the best person for the job, and then I would get myself ready quickly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. So I hadn't been a CEO anywhere else. I had watched a great one work for a number of years and got to fall in behind him. And I told him the last 6 months, I said, screw up a couple things so that I can come in and fix them and I'll look good. And he never did. He didn't help me there, but it
kept going strong.
Yeah, he just stayed strong. But no, it was good.
So you said when you came into the Parkview, you wanted that CEO job and you knew that.
Uh-huh.
When did you feel like when did that vision happen in your head that you said, I want to be a CEO?
I think about 3 years before I got the job. Yeah, 2 to 3 years before I got the job, I started talking to people, seeing people, and getting a feel for the business, and had some success running different departments, and trying to get people inspired and look for that passion out there, and get people to step up, and so yeah, it was good.
Awesome. So you got the role in 2009, and you retired from that. You were in that role for, you said, how many years? 11?
Almost just 1 month short of 11 years.
Okay. So during that 11 years, what was your favorite part?
The people.
People.
Just getting out, meeting the people, meeting the patients. What I did was I rounded in that hospital every day that I was working, and I used to. I loved the job, but it was a lot of hours, and you would expect it to be a lot of hours. But I loved coming in on the weekends, see how people were doing. I used to see a whole crew of people on Saturdays that were regulars, and I'd be walking through, hey, we held a donut for you, that kind of thing. But really getting out and talking to the people and the staff, very important to keep them engaged, but also patients. How are we doing for you? What's going on? And
hearing firsthand.
Yeah.
You're going to hear your issues.
Yeah.
Talking
And
to
you
patients,
do.
Right?
You do. They're not afraid to say this happened or that happened, or, how are you going to help me fix this? And so
especially a lot of them probably aren't feeling too great. So they're probably very open to tell you exactly how they're feeling. Right.
Yeah.
During your time as CEO, I mean, you guys had around 3,000 employees, right?
Well, when I started there, this is one of the things I'm pretty proud of. We had we're closing in on about 1,900, I think, when I took over as CEO. So we grew pretty significantly.
Yeah, that's quite a bit.
Yeah,
that's big growth.
And market share wise, we went from probably 62, 63 to about 89%. So big growth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How do you look over 19 to 3,000 people?
You have good people that you get to work with at the VP level, and then you have great people you get to work with at director level. And then under that, you have great managers. And I will tell you this, I knew something about every one of the managers we had, their story, what they had, and directors, obviously. But we just really, really found great people. And, we didn't always put the person in there that had the best resume, but we'd put the person in there that had the right energy and the right passion for what they were going to do. And I always, having a passion for the job always trumps a resume every time. So.
Yeah. Someone that loves what they do.
Yeah.
So how much of the hiring did you do, or did you have others doing that for you?
Yeah. I didn't do much hiring unless it was a senior level position. But I think one of the other things that we worked really hard on was how do we spend a lot of time, energy, and effort educating our leaders. A commitment with different entities, with different speakers coming in, just to keep them engaged.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to forget about them and save money and skimp, but keeping our leaders, our managers, directors engaged was very important. And at least we used to do it 4 times a year where we'd bring them together and we'd have just these dynamite speakers come in, and then we cut it back to 2 to 3 times a year, which was fine. But it gave us a chance to get together and really, try to say, hey, we need to work on this or that, and kind of grow the leaders.
How big was that team?
Well, if you took in the directors, we had about 65, 70 directors.
Okay.
And then we had, if you took in all the managers underneath that, we were probably close to 150, 180.
Okay.
Maybe 200 by the time I left, I think.
So how many people reported to you on a daily basis?
Well, there were all of the VPs, and that was we had 11 VPs, okay, including myself.
Okay.
And then we had 3 AVPs.
What is an AVP?
Assistant Vice President.
Okay.
We had one that took on additional duties, and that was part of the growth process.
Now, were each of the VPs kind of in charge of a different section of the hospital?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they had AVPs under them, or just managers in those?
Yeah.
those different
Yeah,
areas of the
they had
hospital?
directors that reported up to the VPs, and then those directors had a lot of reports. I mean, we have some directors there that run departments of 200 people, some big nursing directors.
Yeah.
So big, big,
Yeah,
big. Yeah,
I'm sure.
yeah.
Yeah, that's something I've always been curious is how hospitals relay all this information back. I mean, there's so many employees, there's so many things happening, there's so many different departments.
Yeah.
How does the ball not get dropped?
And that's really a good question, and I wish I had a better answer, but I have an answer I'll give you. One of the areas where we were struggling a little bit was how do we communicate to 3,000 people, to 2,000, 2,500, then 3,000 people, and we came up with some different ideas. We had an internal communications person that would share things, and I was behind in the technology. I don't know how to tweet, and I didn't necessarily like that kind of stuff, but had a person that would push me to blog, to do this, to do that. And then we created these requirements for senior team to blog. We rotated through, and we had them create a blog and put it out there. And every quarter, we would hold about a dozen meetings, and we would invite people. They would be paid for their time, and they'd come in, and we'd give them an update on what's going on at the hospital.
And now were these what level of employees?
All the way,
all
everybody,
the way down.
Everybody,
Okay.
yeah. We get our directors together 2 times a month, so that was pretty easy. But when you have 200 employees and you're a director, getting that information out wasn't easy. And so we really worked hard on the communications piece of it. And I don't know that we ever got to where we wanted to be, but we worked hard to get there. And I would always try to reinforce that when I was rounding. Do you guys know what's going on? Have you been updated on this or been updated on that? And if I find areas or pockets where, on a weekend where nobody heard anything, I'd get a chance to go back to the director and say, hey, these guys didn't know anything about what we're doing. What are you doing about this? Or how do we get this fixed? So, yeah.
Okay. So one of the great things I heard about you when you were CEO is that you would walk around and you would know pretty much everyone's name walking through the halls. How did you do that?
Jason, it's something I really worked hard on. And I learned at an early age, as a leader, if I came to you and said, hey, I need you to get over there and do that, it's one thing. But if I said, hey, Jason, I need your help, can you go over there and help me with that? People buy into that. And it shows, that extra layer of caring, which was sincere. I didn't do it because, but it really, at the end of the day, it's about relationships and how you take care of those. And I worked hard on it. And I wasn't perfect, and I didn't know everybody, but I got to know a lot of really good people.
Yeah. How did you start doing that? I mean, that's a daunting task when you have 2,500 employees.
And I won't share the person's name because it goes back a few years, but I worked for a guy, and he never got my name right. And I was with different people, and he'd say, hey, how's it going, Bill? And I'm like, oh, golly, So I never, when people said I'm not good with names, I just thought, don't say that. And I told our leaders that, don't ever say that. That just tells people, from my perspective, that you haven't bothered to learn a little bit about them, if that makes sense. And so, I worked hard on it. And we had our systems in the hospital, and I saw somebody, and I'd say, I think that guy's name's this, and I could look up a name and see who it was. And so I could match the picture. But it was something I took great pride in, and I worked hard on it.
Yeah,
so,
I think that's something that really stood out to me because a lot of people.
It is.
That's a lot of people.
It is.
And to still be able to hold a relationship and really continue to care about that, I think is huge.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
What was your biggest win in that 11 years?
Well, I think the teams we put in place, the fact that we could handle the growth that we handled, and I'll tell you, a couple of years before I retired, we were heading out, getting ready, putting a board retreat together. We're going to take our board away, and we're going to work on some things. And about a month before that happened, we had everything ready to go for the board retreat. And Corwin announced that they were going to be laying off, and they went through that. And that was pretty devastating to our community, and it was certainly devastating to us to say, how are we going to catch up on this? And so one of the things I'm very proud of is the way we were able to put the pieces in place. We opened up a new medical floor and added 24 beds in less than 9 months, which is unheard of in the state. That's when you're on the phone with all the regulators saying, no, you need help here. And that's one of those rare times where you get the right people saying, "You're right, we need to help you," and they did.
Yeah.
And so, getting all those pieces in place, getting the teams in place, and not having anybody say, "Oh, this is too hard," or "This is going to be difficult." But really, really proud of a lot of things we were able to do, and just look back on the teams I got to work with, and proud of the leaders we have today. Proud of working through those challenges, and really proud of where they're headed today.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, you really set them off on a
Thank you.
upward path. So that layoff, that was about 300 people, from my understanding, that got laid off at the hospital, which was huge in a community of, 150,000, where there's 2 hospitals and they're huge employers. What did the next week look like after that happened?
Part of the job of the leader is to keep morale up and keep,
I'm sure there was some fear around
absolutely
around the
what
hospital.
Are we going to do? How are we going to handle this?
If they're laying off, what's happening here?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And, I always used to tell our senior team, and they knew this too, but, part of our role is to make sure everybody knows everything's going to be okay. And so we worked hard on that and messaged that. And we had a great board behind us, and and it wasn't like we said, "Oh boy, let's keep our fingers crossed and hope this all works out." We saw some signs that there were going to be some cutbacks, but we didn't expect anything near what we saw. And I think, as much as I, try not to talk about the other hospital and try to talk about what we need to do, I think that was a big disservice to the community, and from my perspective, a bit irresponsible. But with that said, I actually worked for the system that's across town in an earlier part of my life, and so understanding the difference between a system and a community hospital is significant. What's best for the system isn't always what's best for that community where a system hospital resides, and so I think that came into play. And the other thing that's really important to note is there are really only 2 large community hospitals left in Colorado. There's Parkview, and then there's Boulder Community. And so otherwise, everybody else of any size or significance I shouldn't say significance, but of any size is part of a system.
Okay. So, I'm kind of hearing a common theme throughout your story is that your career was really built through building relationships.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you really thrived, I think, as being a CEO through relationships. Where did that start?
I think, and it wasn't always perfect. I mean, there were people that when I became the COO, there was a guy that was running our surgical area, which was very important, and I had to challenge him to get things done. And when they couldn't get done or didn't happen, I had to go ask why, and eventually we had to agree to part ways. And so there was some of that, but it wasn't for lack of effort. And I always believed if somebody parted ways with Parkview, it wasn't because efforts weren't made on our side to try to make things work. But at the end of the day, everything comes down to, in business, I think everything comes down to that relationship, and that connection. And that's why we spent more time. I like to spend less time on the phone and more time out there talking to people. If I had an issue for somebody, yeah.
I'm curious, did they teach you any of that in school?
I don't know that they taught much of that now that you bring that up.
I'd be curious to see. Just from my background, I'm actually a college dropout. I did a year and a half of schooling and decided it wasn't for me. And so I never got to see the business side of it from the school perspective. And so I'm curious. I mean, that's something I've learned just being in business, is that relationships are the most important thing.
They really are.
And I'm curious if they push that.
There were some organizational behavior classes and things like that, but I think a lot of that, and I'm grateful to the schools and grateful for my degrees. A lot of that is kind of at such a superficial level that it doesn't. When you get into the real world, you gotta figure out how to, relate to people and make it work. So yeah.
Were you a big reader going through all this?
I read things that I thought would help me. I different books and different things, and so I did. I read a lot of healthcare stuff, a lot more articles probably than, as a member of the American College of Healthcare Executives, and I was on the Colorado Hospital Association board, and I was a board member. I was actually the president of that for 1 year. So I got to see and do a lot of things there. But yeah, I tried to keep really important to keep your skills up in terms of what's coming, why it's coming, and how to get yourself mentally ready for it.
Know what's going on in the industry, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So that brings on another question I have is, do you feel like you can lead in an industry that you're not from?
I think it depends on the industry, and I think that there are some basic skills that will carry you and serve you very well. I think having that knowledge that you need to at certain times to make sure you're taking the organization in the right direction, I think you do need some background. So yeah.
Okay.
Well, let me give you a different example. I think that might be helpful. When you think about certain areas of expertise and leadership, like a VP of Human Resources, I think that skill set is transferable because you're hiring, you're bringing people on, you know the rules and the regs, and so I think we're very comfortable looking outside of the industry for something like that. But for any of the COO, CEO, we're pretty focused on healthcare background just because it's so unique. And I'm sure everybody says that about their industry.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. We're so unique, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think the medical industry is very the healthcare industry is very unique in the fact there's a lot of you deal with problems that other industries just don't have.
Correct.
So I could see that, but I was curious just on your take on that because, leadership's leadership, right? But I think just from what I've seen, I think you have to have if you can lead, you'll maybe get in the door. But if you then don't learn about the industry, you might not be in that door very long.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And there's a guy at Parkview today. His name is Darren Smith. I don't know if you know Darren.
I do.
Yeah, great guy. And we brought him over out of train to be the HR guy. And that man worked hard to learn the industry, just worked hard. And after spending 10 years in our industry as the HR guy, he's now the COO. And so that created an opportunity. And it wasn't because, you always want to look for the best people. But if you have the best people within your organization, that's even better. Yeah. And so he really, he learned as much about healthcare in that 10 years, I think, than about anybody I've seen.
And he came from Train, which they did air conditioners.
Manufacturing. Yeah.
And you just liked him as a person, so you decided to bring him on, and he dived into the industry. He was a good leader and worked his way up through that, right?
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. Always impressed with that guy.
Yeah. So, he's a great guy.
It's a funny story. When we were interviewing for that position, we had actually closed the position. And then I got a late night text from him saying, I saw that job, I might be interested. I said, your timing stinks, but let me see what I can do. And so I went down the hall and talked to the CEO, and I said, I think I don't like to, in a job this big, we got to get it right. But I said I would, really appreciate an opportunity to open it back up and talk to this guy. And we did. And so those are just some of those things, getting the right people is critical.
So, Mike, what's something that you're passionate about through your journey of being a CEO and being in that position?
Well, several things, but one thing that really sticks out with me is trying to define, identify, and grow young leaders. And I say that because we were given tremendous opportunity. And one of the things this is going to sound like I'm bragging a little bit, but one of the things I think I was able to do well is identify talent. And brought some people in. There's a gal that worked at Parkview with me for all those years. And she helped me set up the Pueblo Healthcare in terms of the physician network, came in with just a ton of energy, no experience. Her name is Anne-Marie Pruden, and she is now the chief compliance officer at the hospital. She's exceptional. And she grew into that role. She grew with me as long as she could. And then she took a job, in administration. And then I worked my way up, with her. But she's one of those people worked with for 20 years and, just saw her evolve. But even at the lower levels within the organization, and I don't like necessarily using the term lower levels, but even within the entry levels in the organization, finding people, seeing people, and watching them grow. I mean, we have so many great stories. We have a surge tech there by the name of Paul, who started out in environmental services. Uh, committed to what he was going to do, was very good in EVS, but also knew he wanted to do more. Became a surge tech, became a certified surge tech, and he just tells a great story. And it's always fun to have those people talk to staff. But just finding talent, spotting talent, and then giving them the opportunity to grow. And it doesn't work for everyone. I promoted some people who came to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "This isn't for me." But and then I'd say, "Yeah, it is for you," but they'd say, "No, it's not," and I'd say, "Okay." So I I had to understand that too. But really, I think one of the things that's neat is looking at the legacy, if there is such a thing, in healthcare, and saying that you look at the talent pool at Parkview, and it's been built up to where probably the next couple CEOs are already working there if they're willing to stick around and stay. And working with that board and getting that done was a lot of fun.
So when you're looking at a leader or a potential leader, what are you looking for? What tells you that this person is someone that could be as a young leader that could be something that I want to work with, I want to work on?
I think passion, commitment, and attitude. Really about what it takes, and one of the things I think that's more important today than ever is bringing the right attitude, and being positive about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And you don't always agree necessarily with what the organization is doing, but after you try to understand, get behind it, and helping. And I didn't ever necessarily look for yes men or yes women, and I didn't have too many of those. I could have used a few more, I think, actually. But I always look for people to challenge and say, "Hey, why are we doing this?" And the gal that's running the hospital today, Leslie Barnes, she was always in my ear about something. "Are you sure we want to do this? Sure we want to do that?" And I always tell people, she's been the CEO there for about a year. A lot of the great ideas I had over the last 3 years, I didn't say this too often, but probably came across her desk, and she's just that kind of person, very, very capable, very smart. And it was fun when the day came that she said, "No, I want to do this too." So worked out great.
How do you go about growing a leader?
I think you challenge them, and you don't want to bury them, but you want to challenge them. And then one of the things we did at Parkview that was really helpful, we do at Parkview, is we set goals. We set goals every year, and those goals are set to, they're in different areas. They're in quality and growth and finance and service, and every director knows what their goals are. And so you put these goals out there, and once in a while you see somebody and they're sandbagging their goals, and you're saying, "Really? Come on, you can do better than that." But you challenge them, and I like some of the people that never quite hit their goals, because you said, "Wow, you came from here to here. You didn't get here, but really did a good job." But I think to grow leaders, you challenge them, you look for that commitment, that passion, and that attitude, and then you watch to see that they have followers, that they're building coalitions, that they're able to do it, and we just got some tremendous talent there.
Yeah. So with goals, goals are super important, but I think an even more important piece of that is the accountability to those goals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of times we set a goal at the beginning of the year, and then March comes around, and we look back and, oh, look, there was that goal I had. Look at that. How do you pull that? How do you pull that person to make sure they stay on track for that goal through the year?
It's so the pieces were in place. That directors met with their or the VPs met with their directors every month, and one of the questions was, "How you doing on your goals?" Okay, so it wasn't just "Oh, good luck out there." Directors met with their teams too, and one of the things that we tried to focus on with goals, and goal setting is a challenge. It really is. Was that all of the goals tied into the overarching goals the hospital had. So they all rolled up and were part of what we wanted to be and who we were. And so that helped a lot, because if you give somebody some goals and they don't understand big picture what it means, it makes it harder for them to do it and see it. But the other thing is it was fairly competitive within the organization for certain goals. How are your customer service scores looking? How are your cleanliness scores looking? How is this looking? And you didn't want to stick out. You didn't want to be an outlier, and you didn't want to have to go and explain why you were where you were and what you needed. And our question was always, "What do you need to fix these?" And it couldn't always be, "I need 10 more people," because we couldn't afford that. So just consistency with goals is really important.
And so some of the accountability around that is just pure peer pressure, accountability,
Yeah.
almost, right?
Yeah. And we actually had a few scenarios where people came to us and said, when we really pushed hard to implement the goals and make it work, came to us and said, I'm not up for this. And you respect that. And you say, okay, we appreciate that. But they would step down or take a different position or do something. But it was always about, trying to get better. And when you're taking care of people and lives are at stake, it's so important to make that happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of your job's very important.
Yeah.
It's very important to get right.
Every single job at that hospital is right.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, there's a gal that works there in EVS. She's been there. We found out she was there 27 years and she'd never missed a day. And we didn't know that except for somebody said, this guy's been here 10 years and only. She said, I've been here 27. And we researched it and she'd never missed a day. And her name was Rosalie. And when you ask her what she does, she works in EVS and she takes care of certain areas and keeps them really clean. But she says, I save lives, and she does because, that's the first step to preventing infections. And she knows it. And she is bought in and she believes in the place and fantastic employee.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. So it's around, how do leaders build influence?
I think you have to show your commitment, show your sincerity, show you're human a little bit, and but be engaged. Be out there, be engaged, be seen.
Go talk to the people. No names.
Yeah.
Be out there. Build relationships. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. How do you do that? How do you do that on such a
large scale?
Yeah.
Is just we kind of grew into it. And if you grow into it versus you get there, it's easier, because you get to know people. And one of the things I did as CEO is I went to every new employee orientation, unless I was on vacation, and I would talk to them and tell them about Parkview, why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing, and so I try to kick it off there, and then I'd see different people and just try to. I remember I was on the shuttle one day, and this lady that had been at Parkview about a month, she said, this is really neat. I've been working here a month now, and I've seen the CEO 4 times. And I said, well, you're going to learn pretty quickly that seeing the CEO here is way overrated. So let's focus on something else. But yeah.
So Mike, how many hours did you work a week, do you think?
I would say a lot.
Above 80?
No, I probably didn't. No, I didn't work above 80, but I probably worked 60 to 70 pretty consistently. I tried to keep it under 60 my last year. I just made a goal to say, you got to do this, and, when I would go in there on Saturdays, I would see a lot of the senior team. It wasn't just me, and it wasn't, so it certainly but I really loved what I did, and so when you have that feeling and you do that, it doesn't seem as bad. But I was grateful, I didn't miss too many of my boys' soccer games. Grateful to my wife and my family for that support because they knew the job took a lot. I learned that if you're really late coming home and you haven't done a good job of communicating, and your wife asks, "You're not hungry, are you?" The appropriate answer is, "No, I'm not hungry," because you really dropped the ball that day in terms of communication. And so, did little things like that. But my family was so great.
So great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, working 60 hours, those are long weeks. How do you maintain that relationship with your family, and what does your vacation life look like?
We always took some great vacations, and I always made it a point to take a vacation between Christmas and New Year's because it was kind of a slow time in the industry. And I took my boys to Hawaii and Costa Rica and Bahamas, and so we always made it a point to have that time. But I have 3 boys. I have a son now that's 25, and I have twins that are 24. And so they're great guys. They're just great guys.
All boys?
All boys. And, they knew that, and the person that worked with me directly knew if one of my kids ever called, it was stop everything, get him, and find out what it's about. And the same thing with my wife, if she ever needed something, and she was just great. about not ever, I mean, if she needed something, she needed something. But
Yeah.
really, the most important thing in my life was raising my family. And so, how I did that and what I tried to do was just make sure I could be there. And I always used to tell people my boys played a lot of soccer. And so I went to their soccer games, and I always tell people I was the best dressed dad at the soccer games because I'd always show up in my suit from work, and my sons used to joke about that. But yeah, it's so important. At the end of the day, your life's about your kids, and
How did you make sure that you had the time to step away? Because being able to step away and having the time is
yeah.
sometimes a challenge. How do you make sure you had that?
Well, you just prioritize, and you put them on your schedule, and you put them on your calendar. And so when this comes up or that comes up, you make it work. And the gal, the assistant that worked with me, she was just awesome, and she knew how important my family was. But you be there for them, and you only get one shot at doing that, and you got to try to get it right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So you live by calendar?
yeah.
Pretty tight.
Oh yeah, yeah. Every day.
Time
And
blocked all the way through?
it was pretty full schedule. And then when I knew I had to get to a certain thing, I would take a secret way out of the hospital so I didn't run into people. Just because you knew you're going to see people, and so you got to get out of here. And so
So what did your day mostly consist of?
it was a lot of time spent on looking, what's coming our way, trying to anticipate things. I was I mentioned earlier, I was on the Colorado Hospital Association board, and I really enjoyed that. That was a big thing for us. I thought it was important for Parkview to be up there. But, a lot of meetings and a lot of guidance and a lot of coaching and a lot of follow through on how are we doing. So, yeah.
Okay. So it was a lot of getting out of the day-to-day stuff and looking a little bit more at what's happening around us, what could hurt us, what's going on, how can I be prepared for this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then a lot of construction, as you know. We've been building for a long time, so we spent a lot of time on strategic planning. How do we get ahead of this? And so they're doing some great things now that I think are going to carry them for a long time. So,
well, the hospital's in a beautiful area of town. One of the downsides of that is it's in a beautiful area of town with a lot of old, beautiful homes.
Yeah,
and nowhere to build.
Correct, and they're pretty landlocked there. And we when I first stepped in, the neighbors, it was a challenge. They were waiting for us to tear down the next building or do this or do that, and I somewhat formed a relationship with the Old Historic Northside organization, and would meet with them, and we didn't always agree. When we're looking at helipads and different things, and they would say, "Well, that helipad might bother my dog," and I'd say, "Well, the hospital's been here since 1923, and this site, 1925, we built, and so I'm sorry about your dog, but we got to work through this." So we tried to be as supportive as we could, and at the same time, balance, the critical nature of our work and how important it was to get things done.
Got a tough question for you.
Sure.
This is when I was asking around for questions for you. This is one that I got, and it's hear a lot that hospitals have these outside influences.
Mm-hmm.
One big in particular is insurance companies.
Mm-hmm.
How do insurance companies or outside factors play a role in a hospital's decisions?
That's a great question. So, it kind of comes back to what we talked about with relationships.
Mhm.
Okay, so we had some big insurance companies around here: Cigna, United, Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Probably the largest of the group at one time. United was, but mostly it was Anthem, Blue Cross, and one of our things we tried to work through with them, and we understood if we tried to charge them too much or they paid us too much, then the community's premiums would go up. So we try to balance all of that with what we needed to make. And one of the things about Parkview and Pueblo, the Pueblo community, it's a tough community. 70 or almost over 70%. Sorry, my numbers are getting rusty now, but almost 70% of what we did was Medicare, Medicaid, or indigent. And there's no other large hospital in the state that had that big of a component. And that's 70% of your business that doesn't pay you costs. So having to minimize the shift to the commercial was really important. And that meant you had to control your costs. And so we were very focused on that. But those relationships were very important. And when we'd sit down with them and say we needed this, not that we didn't get into some knockdown, drag out arguments with them. We need this, we need to have this. And they'd say, no, we're not going to do this. And, they would play us against the other hospital, and they came to us one year and said, "Hey, the other hospital is gonna do our deliveries for this amount. Can you match that?" I said, "No, we can't." And they said, "We may have to move our business." I said, "In this particular scenario, that's below our costs, and you're gonna get what you pay for." And it didn't last, and we just had to make some tough decisions, and we also knew that the community was behind us, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, that can be really tough, because they're
Mhm.
the ones that are paying a
Mhm.
large portion of the hospital's profits, right? I mean,
Correct.
a lot of that
Correct.
profit of the hospital comes from, or not profit, but revenue.
Well, really, the bottom line comes
in.
from those. You're right.
Yeah, it comes in from insurance companies. So, I mean, do they really influence you guys too much? I mean, do you guys have there are a lot of insurance companies, so I'm sure there's some workaround there.
Well, there's not what we always tried to do, and this was a philosophy I think that served us well, and that was we tried not to create any gorillas. Which what I mean by that, Jason, is we didn't give Anthem a great deal, because then they would go out and get all the business, and then we'd be dealing with a gorilla. And so what we ended up doing from a business perspective was we tried to treat them all consistently, and let them fight it out over their service. And that was a philosophy that I strongly believed in, because I didn't want to be part of a group that created that gorilla. And we had some interesting dynamics. Kaiser came in big and was buying a lot of. I shouldn't say this, but they were undercutting a lot of business, only to find out the next year they lost a bunch of money, and everybody's reshuffled, and so there were a lot of those different things. And I probably shouldn't use their name, but but those relationships were critical. You hit on something that was spot on, and that was our bottom line. And so if we didn't have good relationships, I'd say 95% of the time we did have good relationships. That other 5% was always a gut check about what they were going to do and what we had to do. So, yeah.
Okay. Any other outside influences to the hospital's decisions?
Yeah, there were a lot of regulations that fell into play, and this has happened since I left. But the state legislature introduced a bill that I think, from a hospital perspective, is a bit of a challenge, and that is somewhat price fixing services, meaning you're only going to get paid this much, and it's a nice windfall or predictor for the insurance companies. But when you tie a hospital's hands, it really. So I would say state regulators, federal regulators. I think hospitals as an industry are the most regulated industry in the country, and that makes sense that they would be, even more so than nuclear facilities, which I didn't know that until I was in healthcare. But so trying to anticipate regulations, trying to anticipate where things are headed, and trying to work through it. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, every industry has outside influences. As a leadership team, I'm sure that can be frustrating when you're trying to meet a certain profit margin or trying to hit certain numbers. And then what advice would you have for other leaders that are having a hard time dealing with outside influence?
I think you have to be able to tell your story. And we were, and I'll give you a recent example that we were getting beat up about statewide hospitals were doing very well. And Parkview, our goal was always to try and get to a 3 or 4% operating margin, which is pretty tight. Hospitals up north have much higher margins than that, but they don't have our market, and we had a discussion with Medicaid, and basically kind of forced our hand to say, look at our numbers, look at where we are, look at your costs. And then I brought out a letter. It's kind of funny because they sent us a letter thanking us for controlling our costs and the good job we were doing, and showed it to one of their people and said, help us out here. This isn't about, you trying to get at us and us trying to get at you. And so we were able to do some of those things and really be able to tell our story underneath about what our challenges are. And, and if you're not going to be willing to work with us and help us and make this work for our community, then you're hurting our community. It's really not about hurting our hospital. And then the other thing was, the health insurance companies didn't necessarily like the fact that we said, if you don't work with us, we're just going to become part of UC Health or whatever, and then you'll get to work with one organization. And so we tried to leverage what we could to make it work. But I was fortunate. I worked with a group of people. We weren't greedy. We were just trying to pay the bills and grow. So that was it.
looking back at 20 years that you're in leadership in the medical industry, would you do it again?
Yeah, I would. What an absolute privilege to get to do what I got to do, and I tell people that, and in a heartbeat, I would do it again, and I loved every minute of it. I very much miss the people, but I do not miss the stress that goes with that job, and so that's been great.
That leads into a great segue. How do you deal with the stress of that?
Yeah. You try to exercise when you can, do the things that you can, make sure you're spending time away from work appropriately. But it's tough, when you kind of feel the weight of 3,000 people on your shoulders at times and say, oh my God, if this happens, what are we going to have to do? But again, just trying to balance it and at the end of the day, say, I'm going to do the best I can with my God-given talents, and hopefully that'll be good enough.
So what are you up to now?
It's really been kind of a fun ride. I've been doing some things around the house and trying to learn some new things too. I was always fascinated with welding, and so I've been learning how to weld. And
awesome.
It's been fun. And
is your wife happy to have you home, or is she ready for you to go to?
She doesn't mind. We have a little place up in the mountains, so she doesn't mind after a few days if I say I'm going to go up there for a day or two. I think she still works 3 days a week, and it works out really well. And it's funny because she couldn't work at Parkview when I was there as the CEO, obviously, because I don't like that kind of a model. But she works there now. She works there in the coding department, and works from home, and just great. Just perfect. So it works out great for us. Yeah.
They're taking up welding. Anything else?
Taking up welding. We are doing more traveling. We have a little RV. I do a lot of outdoor stuff. I'm big into fishing. I've been my whole life. And skiing, back into skiing again. And that's been a lot of fun. So really just kind of catching up on, some things that I love doing that I just didn't, I didn't necessarily miss it, but I'm glad I get to do it now.
Anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to?
No, I think it was great. I really enjoyed the time. I mean, very easy to talk to, and I was very, like I said, I was honored to get to do what I got to do, and certainly honored to share my experiences with you.
Mike, thank you for coming on. This has been a big pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Good. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, that's a wrap with Mike Baxter. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you guys for tuning in. This was an episode, again, I was really, really excited about recording. So thanks, guys. And if any of you need help during this crazy time, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help with looking through your P&Ls, helping you guys cut expenses, planning ahead for the future, and making sure that you guys are on track so that when this does all end, hopefully soon, come out of the gate really swinging. So if you guys doing anything, please reach out. In the meantime, best of luck. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you guys on the next episode.
We buck and pretty hot, I'm as happy as I can be.